All right, how you doing today? Today we're going to learn about slope. So slope is how steep a line is. It shows the vertical change over the horizontal change, or how much a line goes up and how much it goes over. We remember this by rise over run. The rise is how many units up or down it goes, and the run is how many units over it goes. So if you look at this example over here, I see I have 2 points on my line. How many units up did it have to go? It had to go up 2. And how many over? 1, 2, 3. Had to go over 3. So my slope, or my rise over my run, is 2 over 3, or 2/3. So slope is a constant number. So if I wanted to find my next point from this point, I could also go up 2 and then over 3 and get my next point to be on my next line. Slope is a constant, doesn't change, and how to get from one point to another is always the same. It's always going to be the rise over the run, or the vertical change over the horizontal change. All right, before we continue, there's 4 different types of slope we need to know about. All right, when you look at slope, you always want to look from, when you're reading a graph, from left to right, just like if you're reading. So if I was reading this sentence, right, I would go identify if the slope is positive, negative, 0, or undefined, then find the slope if needed. You see how I read from left to right? We read graphs also from left to right. So if I was reading this from left to right, I see this is going downhill, right? It's pointing down from left to right. So when it goes down from left to right, that's called a negative slope. All right? My next example, if I look from left to right, I see that it's going up. So if it's going uphill, that's called a positive slope. All right? This next line here, I see it's flat going left to right. So it's not going up and it's not going down. Therefore, that's called a 0 slope. It's not changing. It's staying constant, staying flat. And then finally, we have this one that's up and down. And it doesn't go left or right. And that's called an undefined slope. Undefined slope you'll work with a lot next year in algebra. And what an undefined slope means is, let's see if I had 2 points. Remember, it's rise over run. See, if I had 2 points here, I would go up 2. So my top number would be 2, but I didn't go over any, so my bottom number would be 0. Well, in math, you can't divide by 0. It's not possible. If I pull up my calculator app here, and I do 2 divided by 0, it says cannot divide by 0. Some calculators will give you an error, or an error message. You can't do it. So since you cannot divide by 0, it makes it undefined. It's a straight up and down line. All right, let's practice something. Let's see here. So here's my line. I'm going to find my slope. So I see I have a point here and a point here, these 2 smiley faces. And I want to see if it's going up or down. So I go from left to right. I see this is going to be a positive. So that means I'm going to go up from one point to my next point. And I'm going to count how many up it has to go. So I see it goes up 1, 2, 3. So it went up 3. So my vertical change is 3. All right, now how many over does it have to go? Well, it has to go over 1. So it went over 1. So my horizontal change would be 1. So my slope would be 3 over 1. And if I simplify that, my slope would be 3. So the slope of this line is 3. All right, let's try some more examples. So I see I have a point here on this line and a point here on this line. So I go from left to right, I see this is going uphill. So I know that this is going to be a positive slope. So I'm going to have to go up. So how many up do I have to go until I'm even with that other point? 1, 2. And now I'm on that same line here as that point. So that's how I know how many I have to go up. So on this one I went up 2. So my rise would be 2. So now I have to find my run, or how many over. So how many over do I have to go? Well, I have to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have to go over 5. So my slope of this line would be 2 over 5. My next line, it gives me 2 points. It gave me a point here and a point here. So I look at it from left to right. Is it going up or is it going down? So from left to right, I see it's going downhill. So this is going to be a negative slope. So I'm going to write a negative sign so I don't forget it. So now I got to find out my rise. So it's negative, so I'm going to go down. And I want to go down until I'm equal with this point. So how many down do I have to go until I'm equal? Well, I go down 1, 2. So this one I went down 2, so that 2 is going to go on top. Now I can say how many over do I have to go to get to that point. So how many over do I have to go? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I went down, to the right 6, so my run is 6. So my slope is negative 2 over 6. But I see both of these are even, so I can simplify this. I can divide both of these by 2 to simplify it and reduce my fraction. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So the slope of this line is 1/3. Sorry, negative 1/3, because it's a negative slope. I can see that by using my slope from this line and see if it hits the line. So if I went down 1 and over 3, 1, 2, 3, I see that it hits the line. See, slope is constant. It always hits, if you use that same slope, it'll give you the line. So if I wanted to find my next point over here, I would do the same thing. I would go down 1 and over 3. 1, 2, 3. And my next point would be right there. All right, so slope's always constant. We use our rise over our run. And remember, if it's a negative slope, your slope also has to be negative. All right, what about in this next example? It didn't give me any points. So how do I find points on this line? Well, you see how like in this graph, each graph here kind of makes like a T, like a plus sign? What I want to look for is where the line crosses exactly through the center of that plus sign. So if I look on here, on my line, I see it crosses right through the center of that plus sign there, and also it crosses right there, and also crosses right there. So I could use any of these 3 points and find, oh, here's another one, crosses right there, right? I can use any of those 4 points and find my slope. So I'm going to use my rise over my run. I'm going to choose 2 that are next to each other because it'll make it easier that I don't have to simplify. So I go look from left to right, and I see this is going uphill. So that means it's going to be positive, so that means I'm going to go up. So if I'm going from this point to this point, how many up do I have to go? Well, I have to go up 1, 2. So my rise is 2. And now how many over do I have to go? I have to go over 1. So I went over 1, so it'd be 2 over 1. And if I simplify 2 over 1, it's just 2. So my slope of that line is 2. All right, what about this slope here? I have a line that goes straight across. Well, I know if it goes straight across, it's not changing. It's not steep. It's not going up. It's not going down. It's staying constant. So whenever it stays constant, I know my slope is 0. So this is a 0 slope. All right, what about my next one? Let's see, I got to find my points. Remember, I'm looking for where it crosses at T. So there's a point, there's a point, there's a point, there's a point, and there's a point. There's a bunch of points I can use on this one. What you don't want to do is you don't want to use a line like a point in the middle there because it's not exact and it won't give you a good number of units to count by. You want to find one right that crosses right to that plus sign of the graph to give you a nice even place to count your units. So then you want to find 2 points and count how many up or down it goes. So if I look from left to right, I see that this is going downhill. So it's going to be a negative slope. So I'm going to put a negative and then make my fraction bar. So how many down do I have to go? I have to go down 1, so that will go on top. And how many over? Over 1. So this slope would be negative 1 over 1. Or, if I simplify it, it'd be negative 1. So my slope of that line is negative 1. All right, my last example here, I see my line is straight up and down. So that means I have a rise, but I don't have a run. It's not moving left or right. So when a line goes straight up and down and doesn't move left or right, that's called an undefined line. So my slope of this line is undefined. Pause the video, see if you can find the slope of this line on your own. All right, there's another way to find slope. Another way to find slope is there's a formula to find slope. All right, so we know slope is rise over run, but there's another formula we can use, and that is called the change in y, or sometimes shown as the delta y. This triangle is delta, the Greek letter delta, and what that means is you take y2 minus y1. So you're finding the change or the difference of your y values. And then your run is your x values changing, or the delta x. And what you do for that is your x2 minus your x1. And what you're doing is finding the change or the difference between your x values. And And whatever you get will give you your slope. So how do I do this? Well, first you're going to get 2 points, so you have to label your points. And then you substitute your points into the formula, and then you solve and simplify if you need to. All right? Sometimes they'll give you a letter, and they'll give you this letter M. Whenever you see this letter M, they're talking about slope. We learned earlier in this year, we learned y equals mx plus b, right? So mx plus b, right? M is our slope. So whenever you see the letter M, remember that's slope. So it says find M, or what is M? Slope is always defined by the letter M. A little history lesson for you. Although that they don't know why we use M for slope, but there's some theories, and one is the symbol M comes from monte, which is a French word that means to climb. So think about slope, we're rising, right? So that we're climbing. Like climbing a mountain. So that's why M is used as one example. Another example says that it's M refers to mons, which is a Latin word for mountain, right? So think about slope. If it's rising up like the side of a mountain. Just some examples why M is used. No one knows for sure where M came from, but that's just what we call it in math. So you have to know that slope is represented by M. All right, so for these examples, they gave us points, but we don't have a graph of these points. So there's still a way we can find slope. We use that formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This is something you definitely need to memorize and use, because in algebra you'll be doing this exact same formula. The change in y, or your rise, over your change in x, or called your run. Right? So the first thing you want to do is label your points. So I'm going to label my y points. So my y2 is my second y. That is 0. So I'm going to plug that in for y2. My y1 is my first y point, which is 1. So 0 minus 1. Now I can label my x points. My x2 is my second x, which is 0. And then my x1 is my first x, which is 2. Now I just simplify my formula. 0 minus 1 is negative 1. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. And now I can simplify. Negative 1, negative 2. Two negatives make a positive. So my slope, M, equals 1/2. So my slope of those 2 points is 1/2, or 1 over 2. All right, let's try this next example. I have 4, negative 3, and 2, 2. So I got to label my points. So y2 is my second y. y1 is my first y. Then I can plug it into my formula. y2, 2, minus y1, negative 3, goes on top. And on my bottom I put my x's. So my x2 is my second x value. My x1 is my first x value. So it'd be 2 minus 4. Now I can simplify. So I see up top I have 2 minus negative 3. Well, 2 negatives make a positive. So remember, keep, change. I change those to positive. 2 plus 3 gives me 5. And then now I can do my bottom. 2 minus 4 gives me negative 2. So my slope of this line, or M, equals negative 5 over 2. And that is my slope of those 2 points. Let's try one more. All right, in this example, I have negative 1, negative 3, and 5, negative 3. So I'm going to label my points. So my y2 is my second y. My y1 is my first y. So this would be negative 3 minus negative 3. All right, now I got to find my bottom, which is my change in x. So my x2 is 5. My x1 is negative 1. So it'd be 5 minus negative 1. So I see I have 2 negatives back to back. Minusing a negative is the same as adding. Negative 3 plus 3 gives me 0. 5 and minus negative 1, I have 2 negatives again, so it means plus. 5 plus 1 gives me 6. So I have 0 over 6. Well, 0 divided by 6 is 0. Anytime I have a 0 in the numerator or on the top, that means my slope is 0. So the slope of this line is 0. All right, pause the video, see if you can do these 3 on your own. All right, so slope, what we learned today, slope. Slope is known as the rise over the run. That's how we do it on a graph, right? We count how many up or down on top of how many over. It's also known as delta y over delta x, which also means y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All 3 of these show slope. And remember, slope is represented by the letter M. So if you follow these rules, you'll be more inclined to do better on your test with slope. Have a great day.